Greetings, Wayward Souls, it's the Game Pack Preacher, and we got a real, special episode for you today. Now, I have covered lesser mascots on my channel in the past, but it's time we talked about a man's mammal, a real prime feline, one could say. And let me tell you, the crop doesn't get any creamier than Bubsy Bobcat. Other mascots could only hope to have the staying power, the witty banter, and the absolute riz okay, I can't do this anymore. Stop the music. Listen, y'all can see what date this video went live, and I mean, I figured I would do something different, you know, haha, April Fools and all that, but just, I can't do it. I like to be positive when it comes to talking about mascots. So many of them have been lost to the ages, and a lot of them at least had some level of merit. But then you turn around to this bastard who is still getting games despite none of them having any merit. And if you think I'm exaggerating when I say none of them, well, hopefully I'm about to show you otherwise. So you know what? We are going to do something different today. If you're not allergic to cats at all, that'll probably change by the time this video is through. So straddle in, pounce on those lovely buttons on the screen as we go over why something, anything should have happened to Bubsy.
What could possibly go wrong?
So if you've never heard of Bubsy before, first off, I envy you, and secondly, allow me to ruin that real quick. So Bubsy is the mascot of a company called Accolade. Who is Accolade, mind you? Oh, just one of the many budding video game enterprises of the 90s. These guys were actually founded from some former Activision devs back then, which is funny considering Activision was formed from former Atari devs. Funny how that all works. Anyway, it's the 90s. The console wars are in full swing, and any company is looking for a taste of that sweet, sweet cash pile. The plumber and the pincushion were leading the charge, and everyone wanted their own little scrimblow to try and capitalize on it. Of course, Accolade was no exception, but they wanted to do it better. What if we made our own anthropomorphic animal with attitude, but bigger, with more attitude, and more annoying than a zoomer on speed? And lo and behold, much to the dismay of the world, they succeeded in bringing Bubsy Bobcat to life, and he made his splash into the world in Bubsy, Clawed Encounters of the Furred Kind. By the way, I hope you like all these cat puns because they're not going away anytime soon. So how did Bubsy fare on his first big leap into the gaming world? Well, my dear viewers, it is my honor and duty to inform you that the original Bubsy is one of the worst platformers I have ever played. In fact, I'd go as far to say it's one of the worst games I've ever played. And that should say a whole heck of a lot. Like, there are bad platformers. There was no shortage of them even at the time, but Bubsy finds a way to transcend, clawing himself to new lows yet reached. But to understand how this was achieved, to really understand Mr. Bubsington Bobcat, one must first understand who he was trying to ape off of. Hold on, let me just cast this real quick. So yeah, Bubsy is basically if someone just took Mario and Sonic and just kinda smushed them together. And you would think it'd be that simple, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. Yes, they are both platforming mascots, but the differences basically end there. Mario's games rely on precise movement and navigation of his levels and obstacles. This is done with tight movement and control that is easy to grasp a hold on, while still allowing for more advanced expression for the advanced player. His levels give you plenty of breathing room to plan your moves and act accordingly. On the flip side of things, speed is Sonic's game. Sonic's thrills come from the rush of blasting through a level and using that speed to find cool routes and blaze trails of glory. However, speed and precision do not mix, so to compensate, the level design has to carry a lot harder for Sonic to maintain those highs while mitigating his lows. This has varying degrees of success, but Sonic does have an ingenious way of dealing for when you do eventually slip up with his iconic rings. So long as you have one ring on hand, you will never ever die from any obstacles or enemies, save for the odd pit or crusher. So what does all that have to do with the Bobcat? Easy, because Bubsy tries to have his cake, eat it, and talks with his mouth full all at the same time, and fails. Bubsy can jump as high as the plumber but feels floaty and unruly. He also has this glide for some reason that feels even worse to control as well, and that would be fine if he didn't accelerate from 0 to Mach 2 just from holding the D-pad down for half a second. And unlike Mario, Bubsy's levels are not built for his skill set or allow you time to think. And unlike Sonic, Bubsy is a one-hit pussy that will die to everything. And I really do fucking mean everything. He'll die to projectiles, he'll die to pits, he'll die to water, he will die if an enemy so much as sneezes in his general direction, he will even die if he falls from too great a height. That's right, Bubsy will die to fall damage, in a 2D platformer. If that sounds like one of the most idiotic and boneheaded design choices you've ever heard of, That's because it is. I mean, even in 3D platformers, fall damage is not fun, but it makes sense in that context. You need to be punished if you mess up somehow. In 2D though, it makes absolutely no sense. In fact, I can't even think of any other 2D platformer that has fall damage, because oh, I don't know, it's a freaking stupid idea! Okay, deep breaths. Anyway, yeah, it's a right old mess, and if you consider how talkative he is, the baffling checkpoint placement, and the lovely level names, you'll find that Bubsy will be shitting in your kitty litter from the word go. Even considering the fact you start with 9 lives, get it? You'll find that those will be depleting very fast. Hell, when I played through this game, I used infinite lives, and that still didn't feel like enough. Playing through Bubsy was such a horrible experience that I had to immortalize it, and the killer thing is that people actually consider this game to be misunderstood or even good. I mean, more power to you, but I think you may want to chase other strings of yarn, cause the one I'm spinning says that the Bobcat's first outing was a failure through and through. But I am just one man, and I wasn't conceived when Bubsy first dropped anyway. The world seemed to think differently though, cause the Bobcat managed to get a sequel.
Bubsy, 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 Bobcat!
So in what I can only describe as a radical miracle of the 90s, Bubsy performed well enough to warrant a sequel, so about a year later we got Bubsy 2. Considering how much I tore the first game to pieces, get it? You'd think it was impossible for a sequel to salvage anything. Well, funny enough, to my surprise, Bubsy 2 is actually a genuine improvement to the first game. Is that saying a lot? God, no. But hey, credit where credit's due. So instead of a linear stage-to-stage process like the first game, Bubsy 2 has you going through different themed worlds in the Amazatorium. Ooh. Don't get too excited, the levels only have so many themes to go around. Speaking of levels, they're a lot shorter, which is a plus. But the exits aren't just at the right of the stage. You gotta do a bit of searching to find the exits, which is annoying. But probably the biggest improvement Bubsy 2 makes is that Bubsy doesn't die to everything in one hit anymore. No, he just dies to 90% of things in one hit. Bubsy does have an actual health system in the sequel, and you can restore it by finding band-aids every now and then, but please make no mistake, you will still die to most things in one hit. And before you ask, yes, there is still fall damage. Let's see, what else is there? There are plane levels. Those are kinda neat. The game is relatively short, even shorter if you choose anything besides the Grand Tour mode. Aside from that, I got nothing. Bubsy 2 is a genuine improvement, but considering that the bar started in hell, that's not saying much. I guess it's just sorta there, but we are still a ways off from good. So you would think that 3D is the next venture for the Bobcat to trek through, but before we do get to the coup de kitty, I suppose, there is another Bubsy game to mention. The Bobcat actually had an adventure on the Jaguar of all things, in Bubsy Fractured Furry Tales. Not gonna lie, haven't played this one. I do genuinely like to be thorough, but I wouldn't know where I'd get my hands on a Jaguar, legally or otherwise, but from what I've gleaned about it, it's basically Bubsy 1 without any of the few improvements the sequel did make. I'm nothing if not thorough though, so I had to bring it up. But surely, the third dimension will treat our hero better.
I knew I should have taken that left turn at Uranus!
So with Bubsy failing to make a splash in the market and the hearts of the people, the good people of Accolade knew that it was time to up the ante, and with the console war entering a new frontier with the third dimension, they knew what they had to do. 3D platformers weren't really a thing when they started working on Bubsy 3D, but with a dream in their hearts and rent to pay, the team at Accolade got to work. It may have been a rocky road, but I think they knew that in their heart of hearts they would create something that would change the landscape forever.
I knew I should have taken that left turn at Uranus! Was it something I said? What could possibly go wrong?
Listen, I honestly don't know what I can say about Bubsy 3D Fur-Bitten Planet. Get it? That hasn't been beaten into the ground already at this point. It's certainly not going to stop me from trying though, because it sure as hell didn't stop them. Bubsy 3D is an embarrassment in every conceivable meaning of the word. If anything, this game should serve as a confidence booster to anyone that is looking to create something, because I don't think you could do worse than this. I know 3D platformers weren't really a thing when they started making this game, but they sure as hell were a thing by the time they finished. Bubsy 3D came out a whole month after Super Mario 64. Hell, it came out a whole month after Crash freaking Bandicoot on the same console. And like, I know you can't just throw away years of dev work and all that, not without major consequences anyway, but if I was about to release my game and the competition looked like this, When my game looked like this, I dumped the whole thing out of pure shame if nothing else. I've seen alphas that look more put together than this game. I've also never really played a game that has no art style to speak of. Heck, I'd go as far as saying that this game has no style, period. There are no objects in Bubsy 3D, just an abstract mess and hodgepodge of polygons that are supposed to resemble objects. Floating platforms because why not? Giant obvious arrows because you can't tell where you need to go when everything looks the fricking same. Well, what about the soundtrack? I wouldn't really call Bubsy 3D's music a soundtrack, more like an unending, ever-present assault on my ears. And I mean, as far as the game itself, well, you have tank controls in a 3D platformer. That's never a good sign. Every time you jump, the camera pans upwards, which I get why it's like that, but it still gives me a headache. What also gives me a headache is a game that can't run at a consistent frame rate. No prizes for guessing what game can't do that. You also have what are possibly the worst water levels ever conceived, where the only way to defend yourself is with this tackle that drains your oxygen. You know, the thing that you need in the underwater levels or else you'll die. Like, I genuinely cannot think of a single thing that Bubsy 3D does right. If anything, that's impressive in itself. Wait, I did think of one thing Bubsy 3D does right. When you pause the game, it says, pause. Get it? In all seriousness though, what else is there to really say? Bubsy 3D is constantly touted as one of the worst games ever created, and after experiencing it for myself, it very much lives up to the legend. One would think that would be the end of it after that the career could not possibly be salvaged. Unfortunately, cats aren't the easiest creatures to put down.
Guess who's back? What could possibly go wrong?
So Bubsy 3D came and went, and the Bobcat had become the internet's darling little punching bag. 21 years passed and all was right with the world, but then something shifted in the balance in 2017. Through some means, be it a curse, a cruel cosmic joke, or just some unreal levels of luck, Bubsy actually made a comeback. So we have Bubsy's fourth title, The Woolies Strike Back, which, actually thinking about it, I never really talked about the Woolies. So the Woolies are a race of aliens that like to steal yarn, and Bubsy has a lot of yarn to steal, because cats like yarn, and Bubsy's a cat. Anyway, they are ruled by the twin queens Polly and Esther, and they have been the primary antagonists of every Bubsy game thus far except Bubsy 2, and maybe the Jaguar game. In that game, he fights a capitalist pig called Winker P. Ham, which I will give credit for that one. This has been your crash course on the bad guys of Bubsy, assuming you even ever cared. Anyway, the Woolies are back. They steal more of Bubsy's yarn, and that sadly means Bubsy's back on the prowl. So what can I say about Woolies Strike Back? Well, for one, there's now a dedicated option for how much or how little you want Bubsy to talk. I'd laugh if it wasn't so painfully on the nose, plus anything that isn't absolute zero is too much to tolerate anyway. And Bubsy also has a new means of offense with this pounce maneuver. You also use it to break through walls and junk. And that's it. I wish I was kidding. Because aside from those two things that I just talked about, Bubsy The Woolies Strike Back is one of the most generic, bland, bog-standard platformers I think I've ever played. Like, even for Bubsy, it's just the standard fare. He's back to being a one-hit pussy that can glide around, although there is a shield power-up this time, so there is that. Bubsy controls fine, and that actually feels like a point of praise. The levels are standard and generic, the enemies are there for the sake of being there, there's boss battles. There's no sort of advanced mechanics or secrets to find or anything. Even the soundtrack sounds like it was dug out of a stock sound bin. I just genuinely have nothing. It's just fine. I paid money for this game. My actual hard-earned money spent towards a Bubsy game. You want to know how much I paid for this game? $5 whole, and I was able to blaze through this game in 90 minutes. I could have refunded this game, but I didn't. Because as bland, generic, and overall pointless this game felt like, this is it. This is the peak of the Bubsy franchise, and I'm not pulling your leg with that. A game that is the very definition of a 5 out of 10. A game that I have practically nothing to say about, and was practically putting me to sleep as I was playing it, is the highlight of this Bobcat's entire goddamn career. In any other mascot's case, this would be an embarrassment, but for Bubsy, it's actually an accomplishment to not achieve quality, just mediocrity. And apparently the universe thought so too, because his furry ass got yet another modern title. Behold, Bubsy Paws on Fire. And I'm not gonna front, I didn't play this one either. Why? Because this one isn't even a platformer. It's an auto runner. A Bubsy auto runner that came out in 2019 and was released for 25 goddamn smackaroos. I do like to be thorough, believe me, but even I have standards. Even if I would have picked this up at a sale, it would have been too much to justify. A catastrophe doesn't even begin to quantify. So usually by the end of these, I like to have some sort of point, or celebrate the life that a mascot once had. But the only point I really have for Bubsy's case is, why? Why does this Bobcat keep getting games? Why do people even like his games? Because as hard as it may be to believe, Bubsy does have his defenders. And I mean, yeah, it is a rare thing when a mascot comes back for a second shot, but I'd like to think every other mascot I've discussed so far has had some level of merit. Hell, Croc is getting his second shot come tomorrow. I don't even like Croc all that much, and yet I'm still rooting for him. The most Bubsy has ever achieved is mediocrity, and yet he keeps getting more and more chances only to keep stumbling. Hell, as I was working on this, I found out that Bubsy's getting another title in the future in the form of the Purrrfect Collection. It just truly boggles my mind. So many other faces are just canned, tossed aside, and just never really given a chance to shine in the modern day. But Bubsy is just repeatedly allowed to fail and keeps finding work. Is it nepotism? Maybe. Some divine privilege? Possibly. Is Bubsy perhaps truly a hidden gem and I'm just a salty wacko YouTuber who doesn't know any better? Nah, I refuse to believe that. If you do enjoy Bubsy for whatever reason, more power to you, but you will never convince me that this Bobcat ever put out a genuinely good game. The only thing I really have to say on the matter is that Bubsy better watch his back, because with 6 lives down the litter box, one can only hope that he runs out sooner rather than later. Oh yeah, Bubsy also had a pilot for a TV show, and considering that it's just a pilot, you can probably guess that it didn't go anywhere.
What could possibly go wrong?
Anyway, damn, this is a whole lot of effort to put in for an April Fool's joke, but I mean, it was kind of cathartic, and maybe hopefully you guys got a kick out of it too. Anyway, more to come as always, and we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming.